The Dodge 426 HEMI wasn't just an engine. It was a powerhouse too wild for the streets. With raw power that left everything else in the dust, this engine redefined what a muscle car could do. The story of Chrysler's 426 HEMI engine is a fascinating journey that intertwines innovation, wartime necessity, and a relentless pursuit of performance. This legendary engine, often dubbed the Elephant for its massive size and power, has roots that delve deep into the early days of automotive engineering and the exigencies of World War II. Early beginnings. In the early 1900s, the concept of HEM spherical combustion chambers began to take shape. European manufacturers like the Belgian carmaker Pipe in 1905 and Fiat's 130 HP Grand Prix race car in 1907 experimented with this design to enhance engine efficiency and power. The HEM spherical chamber allowed for larger valves and a centrally located spark plug, promoting better airflow and combustion. However, due to manufacturing complexities and costs, widespread adoption was limited during this period. Wartime innovations. After that, the onset of World War II necessitated rapid advancements in engine technology. Chrysler, responding to military demands, delved into the development of powerful engines for aviation and armored vehicles. One notable project was the creation of the 14-20-20, a 2,220 cubic inch V16 engine intended for the P-47 Thunderbolt fighter aircraft. This engine, boasting 2,500 horsepower, showcased the potential of HEM spherical combustion chambers. Although the war's end and the advent of jet engines curtailed its production, the knowledge gained was invaluable. Simultaneously, Chrysler collaborated with Continental to produce the AV17905B, a V12 engine for the M47 Patton tank, further refining their expertise in HEMI spherical designs. Transition to civilian applications. Then, post-war America saw a burgeoning interest in high-performance vehicles. Chrysler recognized an opportunity to translate its wartime engineering advancements into the civilian automotive market. In 1951, they introduced the first-generation HEMI engine, known as the Firepower. This 331 cubic inch V8 engine delivered an impressive 180 horsepower, setting new standards for performance in passenger cars. The Firepower's success prompted other Chrysler divisions, including Dodge and DeSoto, to develop their own versions of the HEMI, solidifying the engine's reputation in the automotive world. The birth of the 426 HEMI. However, by the early 1960s, the competitive landscape of motorsports, particularly NASCAR, was intensifying. Chrysler's existing engines were formidable but faced stiff competition on the racetrack. In 1963, under the leadership of engineers like Tom Hoover, Chrysler embarked on a mission to design an engine that would dominate NASCAR. Drawing inspiration from their earlier HEMI designs and addressing previous limitations, they developed the 426 cubic inch HEMI engine. This engine featured refined HEM spherical combustion chambers, improved airflow dynamics, and robust components tailored for high-speed endurance racing. Cars with the 426 HEMI engine. Next, let's talk about where this monster of an engine was hiding. The 426 HEMI was factory-installed in some of the wildest Mopar muscle cars ever made. These included the 1966 and 1967 Plymouth Belvedere and Satellite, the Dodge Coronet from 1966 to 1970, and the powerful Dodge Charger from 1966 to 1971. You could also find it in the 1967 to 1971 Plymouth GTX, the 1968 Superstock Barracuda and Dart, and the 1968 Roadrunner and Dodge Super Bee. Even legends like the 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona and the 1970 to 1971 Plymouth Cuda had a 426 HEMI sitting under the hood. These cars weren't just fast, they became collectibles. For example, a 1971 HEMI Cuda convertible sold for $3.5 million in 2014. Street HEMI versus Race HEMI. Then came the split between Race and Street HEMIs. Chrysler actually built two versions of the 426 HEMI. One was built only for racing, and the other for everyday driving. The racing version came first in 1964. It had a wild camshaft and a sky-high 12.5:1 compression ratio. That meant it was powerful, but hard to manage unless you were a pro driver. So, Chrysler came back in 1966 with a version made for the streets. This one had a tamer cam, softer valve springs, and a lower 10.25:1 compression ratio. That made it easier to drive while still keeping the muscle. Engine performance. After that, it's time to look at the engine's insides. The 426 HEMI was a 7.0-liter V8 with a naturally aspirated setup. It used two Carter 4-barrel carburetors, each rated at 625 cubic feet per minute, giving it a total of 1,250 CFM. The street version had cast iron heads, while the race version sometimes used aluminum parts to make it lighter. Both versions shared a similar structure, but were tuned very differently. The street HEMI could make around 425 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque. The race version was even stronger. Features. Now, let's jump to the carburetor layout. In the street versions of the HEMI engine, the carburetors were placed one behind the other on top of the intake manifold. This layout wasn't just for looks. It actually helped improve airflow and gave the engine a quick, sharp throttle response. But when it came to racing, the engineers took things further. In the race of HEMI engines from 1964 and 1965, a cross-ram intake manifold was used. This setup had the carburetors sitting across from each other instead of front to back. That arrangement made it easier for the engine to pull in more air and fuel at high speeds, giving race cars a serious performance edge when it really mattered on the track. Even with these clever intake designs, the real power of the HEMI came from its shape. The HEMI engine had something very different for its time: a HEMI spherical combustion chamber. That means the top of the chamber was shaped like half a ball, which changed how air and fuel mixed and burned. The spark plug was right in the middle of the chamber, and the intake and exhaust valves sat on opposite sides. This shape made combustion faster and more complete, which led to more power being pushed down into the pistons. The cross-flow layout of the cylinder heads made it even more efficient. With intake and exhaust ports on opposite sides, air and fuel could flow straight through, making it easier for the engine to breathe. Less restriction meant better performance, and that's exactly what the HEMI was built to deliver. Beyond this, the dome-shaped chamber also allowed room for larger valves, both intake and exhaust. Bigger valves meant that more air and fuel could enter, and exhaust gases could leave more easily. This improved both power and efficiency. With better airflow and a more even air-fuel mix, combustion became cleaner and more powerful. Everything about the shape of the chamber, the valve placement, and the airflow were designed with one goal in mind: making the engine stronger and faster than anything else around. Not only this, to handle all that power, the inside of a HEMI engine had to be just as tough. The pistons were often domed to match the chamber's shape, which helped raise compression and add more muscle to every stroke. High-compression pistons were made to be strong, resisting the huge forces inside the engine without cracking or giving way. In addition, the crankshaft was another major part that had to take the heat. Many HEMI engines used forged or billet steel crankshafts, built to take the stress of all that horsepower and torque without twisting or failing. The connecting rods were usually forged too, keeping them from bending during high-stress runs. The valve train was another important piece. With angled valves made to match the chamber's geometry, the setup worked in perfect harmony with the shape of the head. This lets everything move smoothly while handling all the speed and pressure. Finally, the cylinder heads were built to keep things cool. With better airflow and heat-resistant materials, the HEMI could run hard without overheating. Everything from the inside out was built for one thing: power that lasts. Comparing HEMI to flathead engine design. On the other hand, most older engines were flathead designs. Flathead engines had their valves inside the block instead of the head. The top of the engine, the head, was just a flat metal piece with a hole for the spark plug. These engines were cheaper to build and easier to fix, which is why lawnmowers still use them today. But they didn't have much power. The air and fuel didn't flow as well, and the combustion wasn't as strong or clean. Compared to the HEMI, flatheads were like riding a bicycle, while the HEMI was a rocket. Engine variations. Meanwhile, Chrysler didn't stop with just one kind of HEMI. Even back in the 1950s, there were many HEMI engine versions being made. The first generation had 12 different models. Some were smaller, some were big, like the 426, and each had its own purpose. That idea carried into the modern age. The new HEMI story began again in 2003 with the 5.7-liter engine. After that came the 6.1 and the 6.4-liter versions. But the wildest ones of all were the supercharged versions found in Hellcat cars, which pushed past 800 horsepower right out of the factory, dominating NASCAR and NHRA racing. Then came the part of history where the 426 HEMI didn't just stay alive, it started to win everything. While most engines were just trying to keep up, the HEMI was busy leaving them behind in a cloud of burnt rubber. And nowhere did that happen louder and faster than on the NASCAR tracks of the 1960s and 1970s. To begin with, you can't talk about NASCAR without talking about Richard Petty. People called him the King, and for good reason. In 1966 and 1967, Petty raced a Plymouth Belvedere powered by a 426 HEMI. That engine helped him win the Daytona 500 2 years in a row. He didn't stop there. He kept racking up wins, and by the time he was done, he had 7 NASCAR championships. A big part of that success came from the HEMI, thundering under his hood. Next came Bobby Isaac, another name that people still remember when they talk about racing legends. Isaac drove a 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona with a HEMI that sounded like thunder. In 1970, he won the NASCAR Grand National Championship. That year alone, he had 11 wins and 20 pole positions. No other driver could touch him that season, and that big, angry HEMI was the reason why. After that, it was Buddy Baker's turn to make headlines. In 1970, Baker became the first person to break the 200 miles per hour barrier on a closed track. It happened at Talladega, and he did it in a Dodge Charger Daytona with, you guessed it, a 426 HEMI. People couldn't believe it. That same engine also took him to wins at the Southern 500 and the Daytona 500. The HEMI didn't just run fast, it flew. Because of all this domination, NASCAR had to step in. The 426 HEMI was so powerful that NASCAR changed the rules. If companies wanted to race with engines like that, they had to build more for regular people to buy. That's how the HEMI became available on the streets, not just the track. It wasn't about fairness. It was about trying to give other engines a chance to catch up. Then came the NHRA, where things went from fast to explosive. While NASCAR had its high-speed laps, the NHRA focused on raw, tire-burning drag racing. And once again, the HEMI took over. To start off, one of the biggest names was Dick Landy. In 1964, he drove a Dodge 330 powered by a 420 HEMI. He didn't just win races, he set records. That year, he won the Superstock class at the U.S. Nationals. His elapsed time was so fast, it became a national record. Landy kept racing for years, always trusting the HEMI to deliver the kind of power other drivers could only dream of. Later on, Butch Leal showed up with a 1968 Plymouth Barracuda. In 1972, he went up against the famous Bill "Grumpy" Jenkins and beat him at the Winter Nationals. That was no easy win. Jenkins was a big name, but Leal's HEMI-powered car proved stronger. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Leal kept racing and kept winning. At the same time, there was the team of Ronnie Sox and Buddy Martin. These two were legends. In 1968, they entered the Superstock Nationals with their Plymouth Barracuda. Their opponent, again, Bill Jenkins. And again, the HEMI won. Sox and Martin didn't just win that race. They kept breaking records and taking trophies. Their Barracuda became one of the most feared machines on the drag strip. Because of all its success, the HEMI earned a new kind of respect. It wasn't just an engine for weekend fun, it became the engine to beat. Drag racers and muscle car fans knew that if you had a 426 HEMI, you had a serious shot at winning, no matter the competition. Thanks to smart engineering, the HEMI was made legal in both NASCAR and NHRA events. Once it hit the track, it didn't just race, it dominated. In drag racing, it helped drivers win big in short, fast races. While in stock car racing, it kept teams ahead lap after lap. The engine earned a reputation for its raw power, durability, and its ability to perform under pressure, solidifying its legendary status in motorsport history. After all this success, Chrysler didn't slow down. They started putting the 426 HEMI into more of their factory-made muscle cars. That meant regular drivers could buy cars with the same engine used in professional racing. This helped grow the muscle car culture even more. Thanks to homologation, the 426 HEMI didn't just stay on the track, it became a legend on the streets too. But there was one big catch. First, the 426 HEMI engine was not cheap. Back in the 1960s and 1970s, adding a HEMI to your car could cost about $1,000 extra. At a time when most new cars cost around $3,000 to $4,000, that was a big jump in price. Many drivers simply couldn't afford it. Still, those who could pay the price didn't mind the high insurance or extra maintenance. They were buying the ultimate street machine. But there's still one question people ask even today. How fast was it, really? To be fair, by today's standards, the numbers might not seem crazy. But back then, the 426 HEMI was pure lightning. The street version could blast down a quarter-mile track in just over 13 seconds. Some cars even did it in the low 13s. And the top speeds? Around 110 miles per hour. For a car that you could drive straight out of a dealership, that was mind-blowing. Even more impressive were the racing versions. Those cars, with their tuned-up HEMIs, could do the quarter mile in 9 seconds. Some hit speeds close to 140 miles per hour. That kind of performance was almost hard to believe. People were used to seeing cars chugging along the highway. Then came a HEMI-powered machine, roaring down the drag strip like a wild animal. Back in the 1960s and 1970s, nothing else gave you that kind of thrill. You didn't need to spend millions. You didn't need to wait for a special edition. You just needed to find a Dodge or Plymouth, With a 426 HEMI, step on the gas and hold on tight. Pros and cons. But, of course, no engine, no matter how powerful, is perfect. To start with the good stuff, the HEMI was built for power. Its huge valves, cross-flow layout, and famous dome-shaped combustion chamber all work together to give you explosive speed. When you stepped on the gas, it didn't just move, it launched. That's why racers loved it. It was a monster on the track and a legend on the streets. Even more, the HEMI didn't waste time. Its shape allowed fuel to burn fast and strong, giving it better pressure inside the cylinder. That meant more power with every single stroke. It was like squeezing out every last bit of energy from every drop of gas. Plus, it had a reputation. Just saying, "It's got a HEMI," made people turn their heads. It became a symbol. If you had a car with a 426 HEMI, it was like having a piece of racing history sitting under your hood. However, the story doesn't stop with the wins. On the downside, the HEMI was heavy. A 426 Street HEMI weighed around 770 pounds. That kind of weight could make the car feel less nimble, especially in tight corners. And when gas prices went up, the HEMI wasn't exactly your best friend. It loved to drink fuel, and a lot of it. Also, the design was complex. The angled valves and custom-shaped pistons made repairs tougher and more expensive. This wasn't the kind of engine you could fix in your garage with a simple toolkit. Finally, not everyone needed that much power. For everyday driving, the HEMI was overkill. Loud, thirsty, and massive, it wasn't made for quiet morning commutes or saving fuel at the pump. HEMI engines are highly modifiable. Despite these challenges, there's one thing that makes the HEMI stand out among car enthusiasts: its modifiability. Though the design is complex, it's this very complexity that makes the HEMI engine a favorite for custom fanatics. Whether you're looking for a few extra horses or planning to build a full-blown track car, the HEMI is highly adjustable for nearly any project. Simple bolt-on modifications like cold air intakes, headers, and high-flow exhaust systems can immediately improve airflow and add 20 to 30 horsepower on a 5.7-liter HEMI. These upgrades allow the engine to breathe easier, translating into more power. For those craving even more performance, superchargers and turbos are popular choices. While many modern HEMIs come with these additions straight from the factory, even older versions can be upgraded with aftermarket kits that push horsepower well past the 1,000 mark. The real magic, however, lies in tuning. HEMIs respond very well to proper tuning, unlocking hidden power by optimizing fuel delivery and timing through advanced engine management systems. If that's still not enough, there's always the option of rebuilding a HEMI with forged internals to handle even more power. High-performance pistons, rods, and crankshafts can make the engine ready for big boosts or nitrous, allowing builders to create custom 426-inch strokers or even larger setups that dominate drag races. The ability to keep pushing the limits of power is what makes the HEMI a beloved engine in the car world, as enthusiasts continue to modify and fine-tune it for ultimate performance. Finally, it's not just about numbers, it's about feeling. Driving a car with a 426 HEMI wasn't just about speed. It was about sound, vibration, and raw power. When drivers pressed the gas, they didn't just go forward, they were thrown into their seats. That's what made the 426 HEMI unforgettable and too powerful for the streets. That's all for today. I hope you liked this video. Don't forget to give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.